You're listening to The Last Straw, the show about reclamation, reinvention, and momentum, hosted by executive leadership and reinvention strategist, Kristi Straw.
All right, welcome back into episode 6 of The Last Straw podcast. And I'm actually really excited about this one because if you've watched episodes 4 and 5, we have been teasing with our guests this idea of how to build an exceptional community. And I'm going to talk about that today. What is the architecture of creating a magnetic community? So many people come up to me and they think, oh, it just must be because you're so fun. Oh, it must just be because you're a great conversationalist. Of course, I've been in sales my whole life. Most of you who know my journey, you know that I left corporate America. I had been an individual contributor as a financial advisor for many, many years. And then I moved into leadership. And so, yeah, I do have a background in sales, absolutely. I do have a background in conversational styles, of course, but that's not actually the answer. The answer, surprisingly to people, is it's their ability to show up exactly as how they are. So the answer is magnetic communities are created simply by curating very intentional spaces where people can be themselves. I want you to think about the idea of burnout. I talk about this a lot. People hire me to come in and do board retreats and all sorts of things for their ERG groups. And burnout is always discussed, but people are surprised when I tell them that the majority of your exhaustion and feeling of burnout is not caused by doing too much. It's caused because you can't show up as yourself in any space you walk into. And so you're constantly code switching, right? We're chameleonizing ourselves to fit into whatever new space we've just joined. I've joined plenty of communities and networking groups. I've spent $100 a year to join, up to $15,000 a year to join. And I will tell you, the difference maker for me and for many people that are wired like me is not that there's other rock stars in the room, right? That happens in any community. It's really that when I show up as the rock star that I already know I am, will I be allowed to be visible? Will I be allowed to shine? Or am I going to have to dim it down? And that is something I cannot abide any longer. And so when I talk to people about creating intentional communities, the first thing I say is, are you prepared to attract people in your community that are bigger and better and brighter than you are? And when you do attract those people that are your ideal clients, are you prepared to sit in the background and watch them shine and support their shine? And this is why I get on this tangent a lot of times, listeners, over the fact that everyone says they're a transformational leader. They're not. Transformational people only account for 10% of the people in the world. It's like a whole statistic. I learned about it in the book, Who Not How. All right? So I only want to be in rooms with transformational people. I'm only interested in spending time with people who are trying to do better for the collective, whatever the collective happens to be, and who don't want to gatekeep access or proximity to power, right? We have the Pinnacle dinner last night, our sold out event, 60 people in Charlotte. I'll tell you, I was really nervous about whether or not I was even going to be able to sell 50 tickets to this damn event. I've never had an event that size before. My best friend, Marie, our 2025 Queen of Connection, she, all the FAA issues and the government shutdown, she's dealing with flights and trying to get home and headed to San Francisco and back all in 30 hours just so she could make it in time for the dinner. And I'm just thinking it would be really terrible for everybody to have made all this time and then for the event itself to suck or to fall flat. And so as people were arriving, and I always get really nervous when the first couple people show up because I never really know what kind of energy they're going to bring. And it's very heavy to have to bring the fun energy all the time. And I started noticing that more and more at these events I'm curating, nobody has off-putting energy. Everybody who shows up is excited and they are confident in their own thing that they bring to the world. And so those are the transformational type of people that I love. And so I found that as I build this community with more of those types of folks, I have a lot less pressure on myself and I have a lot less stress to make sure that everybody has a good time. And I have to say, that really makes a big difference because then you also get to have a good time. And who the hell wants to spend time, blood, sweat, tears, all the things to build a community where you can't even go and have a good time, right? So my first tip to building a community that is actually magnetic and that people want to be a part of is be prepared to be outshined. That is tip number one and why 90% of you will never get there. Be prepared to be outshined at your own events. And guess what? When you get used to it, and I wasn't used to it in the beginning, it is a learning curve. When you get used to it, I get giddy over the fact that I'm creating this space for people to evolve bigger and better than I ever could have imagined. That's what gets me excited. And until you can create a community where you're more excited about the connection and the deals that flow through your community than you are about being the star, you will never have a community where people feel safe to show up as their full self. Because everybody's always holding something back because they don't want to outshine someone else. And so when you create a community where everybody can shine at full strength, this is the magic of a magnetic community. All right? I didn't inherit this community. I built this from the ground up, from an idea that I hated the fact that when I made it to executive leadership in corporate America, the EQ flew right the hell out the window. I hated the small talk. I hated the politics, the positioning, and frankly, all of the performative nature of most of it. And so I said, what would it be like to create a table where nobody has to wonder if somebody's going to go home upset and try to figure out how to sabotage them the next day? And if you think I'm exaggerating, you have not walked in executive America lately. All right? That is the way it is, and it was the way it was for me. Now, for those of you where it's not that way, man, get at me because I want to know. You probably work in somewhere that's like full of unicorn leaders, which is high EQ leaders, and you probably have a unicorn culture on your hands, and I'd love to celebrate it. So please, please let me know. But by and large, that is not the case. And so I really just wanted to create a table and a room where people could show up, make big ass asks for their business and their future. And when I got out of the way, the most beautiful things started to happen. Deals are flowing, tables are selling out, collision conversations are happening, and that is tip number 2 of building a killer, awesome, magnetic community. You have to create an environment where people collide that normally they don't. No one, Brittany, is trying to come to your new community of executive women because there's a million of them, and most of them aren't nice. Or they're nice until you're too shiny. So no, Brittany, it's not enough to just build a community where people want to be and where people make a lot of money. Because there's a million of those communities out there. I've been in them, I'm still in some of them, and I'm exiting them very quickly. Because really what you want to do is create collision communities where people don't normally collide with others that are at the table. And so what does that look like? US Bank recently hired me in New Mexico. Shout out to my girl, Donna. She is literally the best healthcare banker in US Bank history. Okay, so if you're in New Mexico, she should be your healthcare banker, Donna Lopez. Hi, baby. All right, we had a Pinnacle dinner, and the whole point of that dinner was for her to create a collision opportunity for her clients and prospects. So we had veterinarians, and of course, who else did we pair with veterinarians at a dinner? Well, none other than dentists. Why? Why? Because a dentist and a veterinarian very rarely see each other in a social context. And when they do see each other, they're transacting business. And what they found out was, even though we had 6 vets and even though we had 6 human dentists, they found out that they shared a lot of the same problems. They had a lot of the same problems, a lot of the same struggles, and they could be sharing a lot of resource amongst one another. They could be expanding their communities for each other because I know a lot of dentists who have animals. And they knew a lot of vets who needed clean teeth, right? And then the obvious one was, well, which one of y'all are doing dentist stuff for vets, right? Who's cleaning the teeth? And do some of y'all need to make a partnership here? And the collision community of that, and the collision community of the Pinnacle dinners as they have become, and the magic of that is at the Pinnacle dinner, you have just as many executives in corporate America as you do founders, as you do entrepreneurs. And so where do all of these people collide? Not really very often, because you have founder communities, you have entrepreneur communities, you have small business owner communities, and you have executive communities. But why aren't we colliding? So tip number 2, create your collision community, all right? And be very intentional about the caliber of guests that you invite. That is my tip number 3, all right? Guest caliber and intentionality cannot be stressed enough. And I'm going to tell you why. Because people suck. That's why. Now, when I started the Pinnacle dinner, it was 10 or 12 people at a table. I could vet them. They had to have a great heart with high EQ, and that had to have been spoken to me, or they weren't getting a seat at the table. But when you're doing an event for 60 and you don't know who half of them are, it's really difficult. And so the pro tip here is for anybody. I learned this through ChatGPT, by the way, and y'all should tune in to my LinkedIn Live coming soon, because I'm talking about how I've made $100,000 this year alone from ChatGPT, and that will be dropping in December, because everybody wants to know how to make a shitload of money, okay, from ChatGPT, and I'm gonna tell you how to do it. But this is also how I did it. I fed it into, Lex is her name, and I said, Lex, I don't want to seat every single person. I want there to be room for serendipity. But I also need to know if there are sucky people at the table. So what do I do? And Lex's bright idea was, okay, seat 50% or 40% of the people, seat them because my tables had names like trust or clarity or proximity. And there were very specific people that I wanted as anchors at each table. And so I sat 3 or 4 people at a table that I knew could hold it down and wouldn't allow people to be sucky when it came to their turn to share or take up all the time or whatever the case may be. And then I allowed serendipity to flow for the rest of the evening. And so my point to you is the clarity of the people that you invite into the room is critical, right? The quality of them, the clarity of them, their ability to speak an idea in a succinct amount of time is important. Because frankly, when you get to the executive level, as I have, I don't have time for anything else. It drives me crazy. And most of the people that I associate with, if they're in the executive or the founder or the entrepreneur community now, they've been in the other one prior to. All right? So the caliber is super important. And pruning your community is tip number 4. Because when someone shows up to a Pinnacle dinner or to a Pinnacle community event and they don't bring the right energy, the right generosity, they're not offering value versus sucking all the value out of the room, they're not asking the critical questions and helping people think through the next step, they get pruned. Snip, snip, snip. We prune them right out. So my anchors that I have sitting at the tables, they are the ones who will report back to me. So-and-so was amazing. Loved him. He was really great. She was fabulous. This one here was not so fabulous, was only interested in herself, and people did not like her. Now, if you think that these things don't happen at your job, you're wrong. If you think that they don't happen in other communities, you're wrong. I myself have been removed from communities for being too shiny, and it's because they sat around and had a meeting just like this. But the difference is, if you're wanting to create a Pinnacle community, you're not worried by someone else's shine. You're worried if they don't allow others to shine. This is the litmus test, my friends. All right, so we have gone through 4 tips so far. And the 5th and final tip I will tell you for creating a massively magnetic and profitable community is partnerships. Partnerships, my friends. Literally, I downloaded this lead magnet probably 10 months ago that my sister sent me, and it was 30 unique partnership ideas. And so anytime I see a spark in someone or somebody that I just absolutely adore for whatever reason, I think, how could we work together? And if you're not a transformational leader, that is not your first thought. Oh, no, 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 no. In other groups, the first thought when there's somebody new on the block who's shiny and special is, whoa, who does she think she is? Or how can we shut that shit down? That's what other groups think. I've experienced it. I've lived it. So have you. That's why the Pinnacle community is different. All right. We prune those people out with haste. All right. And then also, we look for opportunities to partner. We look for opportunities to highlight anyone but us. And through that, you create the safest, most magnetic community because people show up in service to their full self. They are not having to change who they were at work to who they are now in this room. They get to take the armor off, actually. And the number one thing that I hear about people as far as a feedback is concerned from our events is, I just get to show up into the room and know that I'll have a great time. That's what you want. They don't know why they're coming. They don't know what the hell sort of circus I've arranged. And they really don't know who else is going to be in the room, right? We've got CEOs of the Blumenthal. We've got people who are running activations for Louis Vuitton. We've got people who are podcast producers. Shout out to my podcast producing team. We love y'all over at Focal Groove. All right. This is the magic of a community where you can all show up brightly and lend your resources to everyone else. All right. So I probably belabored the point to death. And here's what I want to end us up with, because, you know, we always end with our ribbon of reckoning moment. So, Kristi, what is your ribbon of reckoning? My ribbon of reckoning is that people don't purchase communities. They don't purchase access to communities. They purchase access to the place where they can be fully seen as themselves. And that is the last straw. This has been another episode of the Last Straw podcast. Let's tell the truth and build something better from it.